where were you and what happened in February 1974?
Well, in February 1974, I had been previously selected as the Conservative candidate for Darlington. This was at a very vibrant time for British politics, because we had to face up to a strike by the miners and their action served to almost destroy the ongoing work of the government, and so the Prime Minister at the time, Edward Heath, decided to call an election.
And there's a story about Edward Heath, isn't there? You've had some dealings with Edward Heath.
Have I? Well,
yes, when it came to tea.
yes, well, Edward Heath represented the constituency in which we lived, which was Bexley. We had been very active in the constituency association, supporting Edward Heath and the Conservative Council. So we had been very active there.
So you knew the Prime Minister? He was your friend?
Yes, well, the Prime Minister was the MP for the area, and representing Bexley, we got to know him very well. In fact, we were one of the principal stalwarts, if I say it myself, of the political activity within the Conservative Party at that time. We used to hold get-togethers with people in the various wards, and Ted Heath would ask us to organise what he called
Tea parties.
village tea party, and so we invited different people, not necessarily people we're friendly with, but people who lived in the area, to have tea, and the MP Ted Heath would come along. Well, on one particular occasion, Ted Heath had got a bit delayed, and however we finally got the proceedings going, and the event was going very well, but it was rather amusing, and it certainly amused pretty well everybody who could see it. The situation where our young son, who would have been about 3 years at the time, saw what seemed to be a very interesting pair of shoelaces, and decided that it would be good sport to undo them. And so Mr. Heath found himself with one of his shoelaces undone, and surreptitiously, without people expected to notice, he did his shoelaces up again. But within 5 minutes, those same shoelaces had been undone again, much to the merriment of the people sitting there, except, of course, Mr. Heath. The one person who was responsible for this was none other than our son Ian Hord. So that just gives you a little indicator of some of the background work that Ian Hord was up to when we lived in Bexley.
He tied them together, actually. He finished and he tied them together.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, there was other occasions where our two sons, Ian and Colin, would join us on campaigning. And another occasion, we were going around with another MP during an election and generating interest in the Conservative cause. And so we would move from one village to the next. After about three sessions with the MP addressing the gathered people, somebody pointed out that they were very concerned that there were two little boys who had been at the meeting for about 5 visits, because we called at different parts of the constituency, and they were very worried that they were lost, and they just were completely perplexed that these two young boys should be in the meeting. And we had to point out to them that they were our sons and that we were there because we were support speakers to the Conservative candidate. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And then one of the ladies felt very sorry for them and took both the boys off and gave them baked beans on toast.
Yeah. One of them was Ian.
To this day, he still enjoys it.
Beans on toast.
That's right.
So that's another little anecdote.
So Darlington.
That was, yeah.
That was
Seven Oaks.
That was Seven Oaks. That was before Darlington. Well, Darlington was our first major campaign in our own right, and that was a marginal seat, and we worked very hard there. As I mentioned earlier, the miners, we had a lot of miners working in the area of Darlington, and they came out to campaign for the Labour candidate. It was pretty hot stuff because on more than one occasion vehicles that we were using for our campaign got stoned, and so it got a bit hairy at times, but nevertheless that was the way of electioneering in those times. We had a marvellous campaign, and we had countless number of supporters, and we had a thoroughly good time. So far as the result was concerned, whilst Mr. Heath, who was the MP, the Prime Minister, was losing the campaign to Labour, we in Darlington actually reduced the swing against the Conservative Party, and the Deputy Prime Minister at the time, Willie Whitelaw, who represented a northern seat, and used to come and see the candidates like me from time to time during the campaign, afterwards said that he reckoned that our campaign and our result was the best in the whole of the north of England, because instead of having a big swing against the Conservative Party, we in Darlington were able to get a swing towards the Conservatives. So that was a very thrilling result really for us, even though we lost. We made lots of friends and still have friends in Darlington, emanating from our time there and during the elections. And so it was a very rewarding, even though we didn't win, but it was a very rewarding campaign, or the two campaigns, and we remember them well. In October 1974, we still had a very good campaign, but the Labour majority in Darlington went up a small amount. One of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make was whether to stay on as the candidate in Darlington for the next general election. Bearing in mind that we'd fought 2 general elections in 1 year, that's very unusual. It's obviously very hard work, not only for the candidates but also for the workers. And after the campaign had finished, that's for the second one, and I had a flat up there, so I was always in and out of the constituency. They invited me when all the pomp and furore of the campaign was over to come up and have a get together with some of our friends, and so then we would go out and have a spot of dinner. And so I said yes. So Christine and I, we went up there one Friday evening, and I think somebody took us in their car, and we got up there, and we went into the. It's quite a big hotel. Doesn't come to mind at the moment. It will. And so we went in there to have our get together with a dinner with friends, to find that this rather large hotel was absolutely packed solid with all our friends, and they sang for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow" and all those things, and I've never felt anything like that before. It was absolutely wonderful, and the spontaneity of their appreciation and thanks was something I will never experience again. It was quite fantastic. And so there was Christine and I in the middle of all our friends begging us to stay on as the candidate for the next election. As I say, it really was the hardest decision I had to make in the political times I was there. So we thought about it and decided that we would stand down. We did so because A, we'd had 2 goes at it, and B, we felt that because we came from the south of England, it would be better and probably stood more chance of winning if a North Country representative was the Conservative candidate. So very, very reluctantly we decided to withdraw from Darlington. But, as I say, we had a wonderful time, and still have lots of friends there. And that, of course, was before we moved to the European scene. Well,
just didn't you have a car that gave you a lot of problems going to Darlington? Kept breaking down.
A car that kept breaking down.
You have a Sunbeam petrol injection. Super.
Oh yes, yeah. It was a Sunbeam Rapier. It did fail now and again, but it wasn't that bad. You remember it well then, do you?
You used to get marooned on the motorway going north.
I think I did get. I think the snow got in it on one occasion. Yeah, you remember that, do you?
Vaguely.
Yeah, and I think the snow got into the engine, which was annoying. But I think in those days I was a member of the AA. I don't think there was any huge dramas. But of course we did hundreds and thousands of miles going up and down the A1 and the M1 because it was must be 300 miles one direction, about 500 or 600 miles there and back. So, I mean, today, think of the cost of petrol and a candidate servicing his constituency would be a horrendous cost.
And how long would it take you to get there?
It would take about between 4.5 to 5 hours. The roads weren't so good, but then against that, there wasn't quite so much traffic as there is today. So, in the round, I think it was quite good. The road to Darlington, up through to Newcastle, was pretty good, and the incidence of traffic wasn't so bad. So it was bearable. I mean, what we used to do was to go up on a Friday and come back on a Saturday evening. So we'd probably have events on in Saturday evening. They would finish about 10:30, and then we get in the car and drive down to our home in Otford, and get home at about 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning. And then we'd have Sunday to ourselves. So that's how we generally did it. But we were certainly up there at least every fortnight.
Chronologically.
So 74, end of Darlington.
Yes,
No,
1970, yeah, end of Darlington. 1979. We had the first ever Euro elections in Europe, including obviously in UK. It was all new, and so we were going to have elections which would bring us the first ever international parliament, which was quite something. Well, one of the problems was that the timetable that they'd laid down for the Euro elections, that's right across Europe as it was, as that there wasn't very much time to do this, and so the question of organising the various constituencies and their candidates became very heated. I was able to get on the approved Conservative Party list in the UK as a candidate, so that enabled me to receive notifications of all the new Euro constituencies who were seeking candidates, members of the European Parliament. So that was all very exciting. The trouble is that they had to do it in a very small amount of time, and we had this incredible spectacle for about 3 or 4 weeks where candidates of all parties were rushing around like mad things, trying to get themselves selected in one or other of the Euro constituencies. But because they'd sort of done it in just a short amount of time, we had selection committees working on the same day. So, you know, you found that one Euro constituency was trying to select a candidate, and another one was doing the same thing next door or in another part of the country. And so it was almost impossible to be at 2 places at once. And so we had the incredible spectacle of some, shall we say, more wealthy prospective candidates hiring helicopters so that they could go from one selection committee to the other very rapidly if they had the facility of a helicopter. Well, unfortunately, my financial resources didn't run to helicopters, either to buy one or to rent one. So I and other people like me were a bit handicapped. But it was exciting time, and I was very thrilled really to be doing this, because it was the first time ever, and that was a very busy time. You needed a lot of stamina, rushing around, going to these selection committees and standing up and speaking in front of them, and then rushing away to another one. And then often you see rushing away, not knowing whether you'd been selected or not. So the whole thing was quite crazy. But in the end, I was selected for the new Euro constituency called London West, and this Euro constituency was the equivalent of something like 8 ordinary parliamentary constituencies. They on average had about 65 to 75,000 people. So then the average Euro constituency was something like 700,000. I think I've got my maths right. So I mean, they were really huge constituencies. Now, mine, I say mine, the one that I was selected to fight for the Conservatives was called London West. That had 8 equivalent constituencies and included Heathrow Airport. It was massive. I decided, possibly wrongly, but I'm not still convinced, that I should not, as I did, fight it like a normal parliamentary constituency, which would have had roughly 75,000 electors. So I went to every constituency in the Euro constituency and worked hard at it. Well, it was all new, it was all exciting, it was a lot of hard work, and I was absolutely thrilled to win my Euro constituency in 1979, bearing in mind that it was the first ever international election, and it was all new, and great big challenge. So that was probably the biggest excitement in my political career.
So how many candidates, or how many MEPs were there from the UK, and how many other countries in the whole parliament?
From the UK, I think there was something like 79. Sorry, I can't answer the question immediately. I think it was about, from the UK, you said, didn't you?
Just roughly, just get a sense of scale.
I think there was about 40 or 50, I'm guessing. I'll have to check that back.
And how many in the whole parliament, how many countries were involved at that stage?
Initially there was only, I think, 9, but Europe in political terms has expanded a lot, and we have considerably more now. But I'll be able to give you the answers to those when I've just checked them out. I really was pleased to do that. To do a first is quite something, particularly when you realise how long the British Parliament has been in operation, you know. And it was really stimulating to join fellow members from other European countries. And obviously, having been in the war in terms of seeing and experiencing the Second World War, and that much of the aspiration for the relevance of having Euro elections was to try and stop any more future wars in Europe. So to be part of all that big movement made one feel very proud. It was all good stuff for me.
So what was your first speech on in the Parliament?
Oh gosh.
Did you have any hot topics that you
Well,
shared?
yes, I think because of the impact and concerns of the role of Russia, and Russia being very close to Europe, if not part of Europe, figures, and so we have to respect Russia. Well, of course, I'm talking in the context that Russia was against Europe holding its own elections and having its own parliament. They said it was ultra vires, and they were against it and would fight it as hard as they could, etc. Right, we actually got up and running, but Russia was very much against it all. And the Soviet dimension was a very real one in Europe. Russia was very much against it all. And the Soviet dimension was a very real one in Europe, even in those times.